afternoon, everybody. We're here talking to Stephen regarding his best-selling book, The Uninvited, and his experiences of living in the Union Screaming House. Stephen, you recently sent out a request on your social media to all of your followers to ask them to send in questions about the book and your experiences living there. Why did you decide to do this interview now? We're coming up on the 15th anniversary of the publishing of the book. So did you feel like this was a good time to talk about it?
I did. I thought, after 15 years, it's time to do something. I haven't talked about it publicly for about 5 years, a little bit over 5 years actually. All of the questions that I get on social media or email or through the website are all usually pretty much the same. I thought if I was going to do an interview, I didn't want to rehash the story. I think everybody and their brother knows the story that has read the book or seen the show on television. So I didn't want to rehash the story. Besides, I really don't like going back there that much. But I wanted to answer people's questions that were coming in. And believe it or not, they didn't want to hear that either. They had some different ideas of things they'd like to hear. So I thought it was a good time. I mean, a book being 15 years old is quite a thing. Most books don't last more than 6 months on a shelf.
Right. You get a lot of questions from your followers about the current state of the house, like what it's like living there now, although you don't. Do you have any contact with more recent occupants of the house?
It's rare. I don't really talk to anybody too much. I'm not in Union. I haven't been in Union for quite some years. Actually, I don't think we've stepped in Union for over 6 years. So I really don't know what's going on there. Sometimes I hear inklings of things, but people will tell me the house is empty, or they always like to keep me abreast of if it's empty or someone's living there or not. And I live in Mexico. I live in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, in our house here, so I'm very disconnected from Union. And I can't tell you how many times I get emails from people saying, I'm from such and such ghost team, can you get me in the house? No, I can't. I have no contact.
Right.
I'm away from it, and actually kind of like to keep it that way.
Yeah, a lot of people think you still have some sort of connection to the house from 15 years ago, which really is...
Well, more than 15 years ago,
Yeah.
2001, May 18th, 2001. So think about that, but when they read the books or they see the television show, I think what it does is they see us back in that snapshot of time, which a lot of time has changed. I mean, the kids are grown now, so it's very, very different.
Have you had any contact with the landlord of the property that you rented the house
The
from?
last time I had contact with the landlord would have been in 2009, I believe. And that was when I did a lecture at East Central College in Union, Missouri. She showed up there. And there was a confrontation there. Now I'm going to write about this in the special edition of Blessed of the Wicked coming up. But I turned around in the audience and I saw her sitting there. And she kept raising her hand to ask questions. And I always have a question and answer at the end of the lecture. And so what I did is I waited until I had a good amount of time left, and I turned around, and her first person I called on was her, the landlady. And what I didn't know that night is that the audience was filled with other renters. And they took care of it for me. It was a nice thing for her at all, actually.
So a lot of other people that had rented the house after you left showed up for the book
Oh,
signing?
even before. I mean, there was one girl, she said, the landlord said something, and she went over the top of the theater seats after her. It was a crazy, incredible moment, and I literally just had to stand there. I figured, you got questions, ask me the questions. I'm never afraid to answer anybody's questions, including hers. The shock came when it was everybody else that took care of it. It was a crazy night.
What did she say to you?
Well, at first she started saying, Mr. LaChance, I am the landlady, as you know. And she didn't get much further than that. She said some racial slurs towards the woman that had lived there, the mixed couple that had lived there. And people really took her down for that. It was not nice. It was not nice. It wasn't nice at all.
Now,
I got a fly flying around, too.
Wasn't this character male in your book?
Yes.
And-
Yes, in the book,
But
the
it's a woman.
landlord was considered male. And the reason they did that is it's called a legal edit that you go through. When you write a book and you go through a publisher and it's actually a published work, they came back to me and they said, what we're going to do is we're going to change all the he's to she's and all the misses to Mr. and we're going to make him a man. And I was like, fine, because the truth of the matter is, as far as the landlady goes, she was very asexual in ways. She was kind of like, I don't want to say this, but it was kind of draggy in some ways, I guess. So it was true to form. It's what they did for the legal edit, and that's why.
Okay. Do you know if anyone has ever spoken to her directly about why she continued to rent this house out to innocent families, knowing full well what went on there?
Yeah, everybody has at different points. I know several of the people that have lived there that have done that. And she always plays cat and mouse games with it. She always drops the little hints. You know, there's an email that she sent me right after we moved out and another family moved in. And she said, I can hear the little children running around upstairs. I can hear their little angel screams. I hope their parents will take care of them tonight, something along those lines. She knew what she was doing. And she liked to play with people over it. Does that make sense?
You said that her character was changed in the book, which, was that true for all the character, or a lot of the characters in your book? Their names were changed, and
we did it for the kids first. The reason we did it for the kids is we thought, well, it would help protect their identity some. We never expected the book. I never expected the book. I wrote the book for myself. I never expected 15 years later we would be sitting here talking about this book still. That's just completely unheard of. So yeah, the kids' names were changed. It was to protect them. And the funny thing is Linda, who is Helen in the book, she actually picked out her name. And I insisted on it too, because I thought, well, it's a good idea that, you know, if they want to go and tell their stories later, I want them to have their format, and by changing names, it was easy. Everyone signed releases to the book, so it wasn't for anything like that or anything. It was more for their situation than mine.
as you, speaking of your children, how has the experience affected them in the last 20 years?
You know what? Surprisingly, I would say that you would be surprised how little it affected them. I mean, after the fact, it took a little bit of time afterwards for us to get our feet back on the ground and stuff. But as adults looking at them now, they're all very well adjusted. They're contributing members of society. We're very proud of them. So I don't think it was as lasting of effect as everybody seems to believe.
Other than the small parts they've done in the television shows, do you think they will ever want to tell more of their side of the story?
That's coming. That's coming. We're trying to find somebody that'll do it. We're in negotiations with one company, and you know, the one thing you need to know about entertainment, it never ever pans out the way you think it might, or what might happen,
Or as
what
quickly
not,
as you
or
might
as quickly
think.
as you like. So we're actually looking at some different things, but they're ready. We're ready to do something as a family, where we will get in front of the camera, all four of us, even my father and mother. I mean, we're all ready to talk about it. You know, I waited for them to the time when they were interested, and they're interested in doing it. And I think people would be surprised to hear their side of things, because every single person views things in a different way, in a different light, and it's kind of really interesting and a learning thing about a haunting and how it affects a family. And I think it would be a good thing for them to do. And we're looking, so we'll see how that goes.
Has anything happened from a paranormal standpoint to any of them since this, or are they involved in the paranormal?
No. They're too busy, first of all. Eli is a scientist. He's a chemist. He's busy working, and he's working on his master's, and his life is very stable. And Elliot runs a restaurant with his wife and bar, and they have 2 young kids, and things are going very well for them, and they seem to be doing really well. Eliza, she's doing great with her girls. I mean, she's raising 3 girls, teaching them, working. I'm doing everything that adults do. No, I think, at least not that they're talking about. But, you know, paranormal things are, a lot of times you'll get things that happen and they're just very brief.
When you look back on that experience and the time you spent in the Screaming House, how do you feel about it now?
I would do things differently.
What would
I
you
would
do
do
differently?
things, well, because I thought the idea of when this started happening and you had no explanation for it, I thought the idea would be go to the people that know how to deal with these kind of things, you know, like Lorraine Warren was one for that matter. Johnny did a good job for us, he really did, and the church. But I think I would have taken more, I would have brought more science involved into it, because I think there's a lot of things that could have maybe been answered, the way things were going and how they were happening, maybe from a scientific standpoint. I watch a lot of different kind of things now, and I see things that are very much like what happened to us. I mean, believe it or not, even alien shows with the flashes of blue light and such. And I'm having thoughts that maybe science would have been able to answer some of those. I don't know.
You mentioned the Catholic Church. Can you talk a little bit about the report that they wrote at the end of their investigation?
That was a surprise, by the way. I didn't know they were doing that. It came out of from a demonologist exorcist, a priest.
It was quite lengthy, right?
He's a priest. It's 156 pages. In the report, I got it on the day before Thanksgiving of 2012. It was mailed to me. Now, I was living in Myrtle Beach. I don't even know how they knew where I was, but they had my address and everything. They sent the report directly to me. And I opened it up, and there is, you know, the reported evaluation of the Stephen LaChance Union, Missouri, haunted by the Roman Catholic Church.
So they just sort of did this on their own, and you had no idea that
Right.
they were preparing.
And can you imagine the shock on my face getting it? And it came out of a church. It came out of Ohio somewhere. And the report is very, very interesting. And I think in a way, it's the church's way of apologizing, not being able to get to us fast enough. I always think in some of the things in the report, and people will see this when they eventually read it, is the church is actually apologizing for not getting to us soon enough because they felt they could help. In the main point of the whole report, and it's very interesting, and I think people reading it will be a learning thing for everyone, but the main thing in the report is they call it the haunting, a demonic infestation, oppression, obsession, and possession.
Were they able to identify any of the demons that were in the house?
That's an interesting question. Yes, in some ways. In others, no. But well, let me put it this way. In conversations with the church, the name came up, and I don't throw it out there too often.
Probably a good idea.
I don't know if I've ever, maybe in Blessed I did, but I don't think I've ever talked about the actual name. But yes, we do know.
And you're including this in the follow-up edition of
yeah,
the Blessed?
I will. I'll include it in there. But, you know, the point of the matter is my mother put this in a really good context when we got the report. She said to me, you know, this is just one aspect of thought. She goes, you can take it for what it's worth, take what you need out of it and move on. But it's one idea, you know, and it's true. I mean, there's the science idea, there's the spiritual idea, and then there's the religious idea, and all these things that sometimes work together and sometimes they work against each other. And I think she was very, very smart in it. And I hope when people read the report, because it's a scary document to read, by the way, that they will keep that in mind and they will adjust it and put it into their frame of mind and where they stand in the middle of everything at this point in their life. I think that's the most important thing.
In the book, one of the religious elements you described that was already in the house when you moved in are the cherubs that bordered the living room walls, along with there were pictures of angels that were already there.
No, the angels we hung, but the cherubs were there.
You hung. Why do you think there were cherubs everywhere in the room?
Well, I didn't know that at the time. I thought it was, my daughter thought they were pretty because she liked angels, you know. But I didn't think about it at the time until we got into much things later and the understanding of different things and different people claiming they were, you know, charismatic and charismatic Catholicism. The landlady said that at one point. But what we do know, and I will tell you, and this was a good question when someone asked it, I kind of started smiling because people don't realize that Satan was a cherub. The Bible talks very clearly about that. So maybe it had something to do with it.
And while you were living there, you had neighbors, right?
Yeah.
Next door and across the street. Have you been in contact with any of them in the last
Well,
20 years?
while we lived there, it's important to understand that the neighbor that lived next door, she was blind and disabled. She didn't see, she didn't hear. She didn't do much. So there was no talking to her, and if I could have talked to her, she wouldn't have had too much information to give. Now the people across the street, on different occasions, I have spoken to them, and I actually, the house next door, I've spoken to tenants afterwards, and they all talk about things that happened. The gentleman that was living across the street when we actually lived there, he actually contacted me a long time ago, and the interesting things that he had to say were pretty interesting. And I asked him, I said, well, why didn't you stop and tell me that I was in trouble? And he goes, because I knew you wouldn't last there for long, because no one ever did. So in the end, I forgave him for it. I mean, I understood, you know. You're living there, you're trying to live there, you got this crazy stuff that's going on all the time, people coming and going, and people running out in the middle of the night and stuff, and he heard the screams. He saw the figures in the windows. Everybody that's ever lived across the street that's ever been in contact with me has also talked about hearing the screams and seeing the figures in the windows and people running in and out. So, I mean, it's not uncommon.
Was there anything that followed you after you left the
Oh
house?
yeah, I wrote a whole book about it. I mean, Blessed Are the Wicked pretty much covers a lot of that, but it followed me up until 2011. And in 2011, I mean, we had stuff going on. I mean, in 2011, before my surgery, I remember walking into my kitchen and finding all of my drawers and cabinets open in my kitchen in another place, and all of my knives lined up in a row on the floor. That kind of stuff. In 2011, I had heart surgery, open heart surgery, and I died on the operating table. Only for 38 seconds, but I guess 38 seconds is long enough. But I really do believe in a lot of ways the really strong attachment of it all ended that. Because I came out of it and it's not been the same since.
So do you feel like this experience affected your health and well-being after you left the house?
Well, I know the stress did. You know, the stress of it, I mean, from 2001 to 2011, the stress of it did. You see that with a lot, and I see that a lot in the paranormal. I'm watching people. There's a lot of heart issues going on. There's a lot of stroke. There's a lot of things like that going on out there. I know it affected me in a lot of different ways. You know, and then years after we left the house, now people like to talk, there's some people that like to talk about this, and I'm going to address it publicly. You know, there's people that say, well, you know, he has a sleeping disorder. Well, the disorder that I have is from a car accident I had years after I lived in the Union House. We hit a car in our van. Both my daughter and my heads both hit the windshield. And what this caused was, it's a small mark on my brain. And it caused what they call, it's a non-symptom narcolepsy, meaning non-symptom before the accident. It was post-traumatic narcolepsy. And so I'm a narcoleptic now. And when I went and told this, when everything got diagnosed finally, and I went and told this, it's one of the big things about the paranormal that I hold against it, is because I had a whole lot of people say, well, you can't tell people that. And I'm like, you know, bullshit. I can tell people whatever I want, number one. Number two, I haven't hid anything. Number three, this had nothing to do with the haunting. Number four, it happened after the haunting. And number five, I'm now disabled because of this. You know, so I think people need to stop and realize before they talk about things that they know exactly what they're talking about. And this includes that woman out of the UK right now who thinks she's got her handle on everything because she doesn't.
Well, in addition to the physical aspects of it, oftentimes paranormal experiences awaken a mental sensitivity to spirit or whatever you want to call it. Has your experience in the Screaming House opened up any kind of paranormal sensitivity that you thought you didn't have before?
I think immediately, actually. And the reason that I've always said to people over this is, I think it's like this. I just know what it feels like. It's nothing that I'm feeling that you or anyone else, well, you feel it now because you live with me, but anybody else doesn't feel, because it's just paying attention to it. Once it's pointed out to you and you know what this feels like, and you know what it is, you're like, well, there's something to that. I always tell people it's like hot and cold water. I mean, we learn the difference between hot and cold. It's all labels. But I think it made me more aware of it, but I don't think it's anything extra special.
Do you still experience any supernatural activity today?
All kinds. Well,
I'm laughing when I ask
say,
that question.
I say like all kinds, but leading up to this, to doing this, and this is one of the reasons I don't like doing it, is you'll have things happen. Yeah, we deal with lights coming on by themselves. We deal with different things happening in the house, things moving and such like that. I had a family member staying here, and they asked me the same question sitting on the living room couch. They said, "Do you ever have anything happen here?" And a light went on by itself above their head the moment they said it. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it does. It's not screaming house kind of
Right.
thing. So, it's lights. It's noises occasionally.
Has your approach to the supernatural changed over the years?
Yeah.
Do you feel more comfortable with it?
Yeah, I think you do after a while, because I mean, at first, the shaking of a door seems scary, or the shaking of doorknobs, or your first experiences if you see something, or a light comes on, or the TV comes on its own, or the stereo. Those are very earth-shattering moments, or the closet door opens by itself at first. But, after a while, that sort of thing, you get used to. Now, shit flying across the air, and, your dresser coming out against the wall, and, the devil himself being in the room with you. No, you'll never get used to that. The one thing in the Union House that used to frighten me the most, and I'm glad it doesn't happen anymore, is the breathing. When the thing would be over your shoulder breathing in your ear, because you could hear it, and it would be like, and that was more frightening to me than anything. I'm glad that doesn't happen no more.
Are there any unanswered questions about the haunting? In the past, you sort of said that there were things that you felt never really got answered. What did you really mean by that?
I don't think we will ever really know the full impact and the full reason behind it, or if somebody was involved or if they weren't, or I know the history. The history is there. Everybody's read the history and bless it. I don't know exactly for sure. I still have questions that were never answered, and I think, I could have spent my life looking for answers about the dead, and then what happens there is you don't end up living your life. I'd rather spend my time working on the living. I'm going to learn about the dead eventually. We all are. But as far as answering every question, no. Some of them, I think, but you change your mind over time too, and things can change. Mm-hmm. It's like talking about the blue light. I was watching an alien show recently, and they were talking about the flashes of blue light in different things. And that was one of the things in Union that would happen. As a matter of fact, other tenants later and before both have talked about the flashes of blue light. That's very much an alien thing. I think it goes back to what my good friend Rosemary Owen Guiley used to say, that there's a stream of truth in all of this, a string of truth, and all of it is connected. And someday we're going to find that out, but I don't think we have at this point. So I think it would be foolish of me to ever say I'm an expert, or it'd be foolish of me to say I have it all figured out, because that would be a lie. I don't.
A lot of the things from your experience are like seen in so many horror movies now. Do you think a movie will ever be made of your experience in the Union House?
Well, it's hard with horror movies. You know how that is. It's like yawn. When I was living in the Union House, I went and saw The Grudge, and I fell asleep halfway through. It was the most boring movie I thought I ever saw in my life, because I was living the real thing. But there have been discussions. You would be surprised to hear the people we've talked to about different things. Movies are hard to get made. My idea for the Screaming House is, and the Union, Missouri Haunting, is I think it would make a great series on like a Netflix or a Prime Video, or something where it's told in extended episodes or HBO Max. I would like to see it done that way. That would be the ideal situation because I think it's a pretty complex story. There's a lot of parts and moving parts to it and a lot of things that people don't understand about it that I think that kind of telling could tell. It could show the over-the-top scary parts of it, but those subtle things and the emotions involved. See, a haunting is not just being afraid. A haunting is sadness. It's emotional. This is the emotion that I believe fuels the whole thing.
Well, that's one of the bad things about those short format, like the haunting, is there's basically no character development. You don't really get into the...
And they never know how to end them. You ever notice these horror movies, they would never know how to end them. And that's always been an issue. It's like, well, how do you end this story? Because it was so ongoing. And I'm like, well, you have to tell the whole story. You know, I had somebody that got pitched it once that was, it's like The Exorcist meets the Amityville meets Halloween or something. And it was like, no, never mind. Because I knew they didn't understand the complexity of it. If it's going to get done, I'd like to see it get done right in that way. The other things like Crazy and Confrontation, a movie with them would be fine.
You mentioned something about a special edition for Blessed Are the Wicked this spring. Can you talk a little bit about
I'm excited about this. I think this is a book that, taking some time away from it, is going to be a fun one to revisit. Plus, I get to put the Exorcist report in the book now and share that. Plus, there's going to be some new chapters. We're going to talk about that visitation with the landlady at the college lecture. That's going to be part of it. So I think it's a good time. Blessed is a book, I'm going to say it, and I think it's a little bit ahead of its time because it deals with all of the complexities of what adds to a haunting and what becomes a haunting and what happens after the haunting. I think those things are never really dealt with properly. I think they did a good job in Haunting in Connecticut with that, though. The mother in her grief with her son with cancer. But these are things that are very, very important to why these things happen and how they happen. You know, I didn't write this book for somebody just for entertainment. I wrote them for reasons, and maybe people can learn something about themselves from it.
What about other future books or projects? What have you got in the works?
Well, Blessed first. We got to get that one. That'll be this spring, and then we're doing some different things. We're doing a book. I've been traveling the world, literally traveling the world. I mean, just this past Christmas, we were in Egypt and Israel and Greece. So you're going to see books come out of those. They're going to have supernatural elements to them. They're going to have travel elements to them. They're going to have stories to them. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to try something a little different. I'm writing these books for my grandkids, really. I want them to have something to go back to. And there's going to be 2 books a year. One of them is going to be a travel sort of book like this is what I'm planning, and the other will be what you expect out of me, which will be something more true life horror or even fiction, maybe. Horror fiction.
Well, the last question on my list, which is kind of an open-ended question, but it might be a good way to end, is what's your life like now?
My life is good. I'm married. You're hearing my husband right now. It is really, really good. You know, I used to get so wrapped up in what people thought, you know, and what they believed and what they didn't believe. But the truth of the matter is I never wrote the book or came out with our story to convince anyone of what was real or not, you know. I want people to make up their own minds and think about where they are and what they believe and what their thoughts and stuff are. And I think I look back at it now, and in the form of this question, I look back at it now, it makes me happy because I think that's what it really has done. Even when I see like that girl from the UK who thinks she's got it all figured out, at least she's thinking. Does that make sense? I mean, even when they question things, they're thinking, but that was always the case. But I didn't write the book for them. I didn't write the book for anybody. I wrote the book for myself. I wrote the book to get it out. That's why, I think that's why The Uninvited is done so, hang on for so long, is because of the true raw emotion of it. But that person that lived there now and that person that I am today are very different people. I'm happy. The kids are happy. We got great kids. We got great grandkids. We live in the Caribbean in Mexico off the blue water. We built our house. I mean, the first time I'm letting you see our house, really, I'm letting anybody in. You know, I've been really kind of private and not letting anybody in too much. This year I decided, you know, I'm going to be a little bit more open because I find it hard when those people contact me and they don't really realize that I'm this totally different person now than I was back in 2001 when I was running out of a door at night with my children in my arms. It's just very different, and things are so much better. And I think that's the important thing about revisiting Blessed, because the guy that I am now, I can talk about a little bit at the forward and in the ending to make people realize that you can do this. You can get through whatever it is life puts before you. I'm built to withstand hurricanes now, literally. And you can get through it. And in the end, it will work out. It's not lost. And it's all comes from you. It comes from inside. And that's the person I am now.
Well, after seeing this, people might want to ask more questions. Are you open for that? Or do you want to do a part two?
Well, we could do a part two if you want. My door's always open too. I mean, if you want to, you know, send me an email, private message me on Facebook, you know, Instagram, my website. I answer everyone's emails. I have never gotten a question that I do not answer. You know, I do my best. Sometimes I may not have the answer you want, but I do my best. You know, I have never shut the door on this in the way that I don't want to talk about it. I get aggravated with those questions of, can you get me in the house now? Well, the reason that I get aggravated is it's kind of disrespectful in some ways when people ask me the question. Because that literally was one of the worst moments of my life, and you're asking me if you can go into it like
why would
it's
you
a
want to
trip
go there?
Yeah, well, why do you want, you're acting like this is Disneyland. This
Right.
almost killed me.
Right.
You know, so that gets aggravating. But if you call me or talk to me or instant message, whatever, and you ask me, you know, well, what did you think about this, this, and this? And I'll tell you. I'll give you the best answer I can. And if you want to do another one of these, we will. We're going to be doing some more. I want to do one on Zombie Road. I want to do one on Leopoldstadt in Europe. I want to do a lot of different things. This is going to be a supernatural series where we talk things supernatural. And I think in the end, it's, you know, there's a lot to learn and a lot to talk about. You know, Vienna, man, we could talk about some supernatural events in Vienna, can't we? But yeah, so that's, you know, kind of what I do. So you're going to see more.
Good.
I hope it works. I hope you guys like it. So let me know in comments below or wherever if you like it or you don't, or if you want to do another one, we'll do it. It's up to you. I mean, this was really for you, and that's why I did it. So I hope you liked it. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Rick, for answering asking the questions. People don't get to hear from you too often. I thought it would be nice to do it this way in our home, with you asking the questions that came in from the outside, because I feel so much more relaxed talking about it in my space and with someone I'm comfortable with. And I think it shows. I hope it did. Let me know what you think. All right.